Hi guys, and welcome to my video, Should you stop your child's music lessons? Stay to the end of the video to find out my answer and just my opinion. What about if your child doesn't even practice? Should you stop them because of financial reasons? Because music lessons can be costly, and especially when you don't feel like your child is putting any effort into those lessons, can feel like it's kind of money going down the drain, can't it? I believe that you should still consider keeping those lessons going, even if that's the case. But first of all, let's consider why they don't practice, because this is the first thing that kind of indicates to parents or makes them start to think about whether or not the lessons are worth it, because they don't see anything happening at home. So you've got to look at why they don't practice, not just that they don't. First of all, what are the practice expectations and who are they being made by? Is it the parents themselves or is it the teacher? Because depending on where the child is coming from in terms of if a regular practice routine is something that they've never done, saying to somebody or saying to parents who are being asked to oversee half an hour a day's practice, for example, is just unrealistic and impossible. And when you're trying to encourage a child to do that, which is always difficult as a parent, they never want to do what the parents tell them to do or ask them to do, and it can become quite a battle. But asking them to do from zero or from very little to half an hour a day, which is quite an amount of time over the week, is really hard. So I think the most important thing, it's about, as everybody's been talking about over the last few years, creating habits. And the most important thing about habit is how regular and the consistency of them, not necessarily the size. So I think the first thing to do is to lower those expectations and look at just doing, even if it's 1 minute a day or 2 or 5 minutes a day. It's something that in the back of that child's mind, they think, that'll be over quick and I don't have to do it for very long. I can do that. 9 times out of 10, if somebody sits down with the intention of practicing for a minute or 5 minutes, it ends up being longer than that anyway. It takes longer than 1 minute to play most of the pieces that your child is probably playing. What pressure is being put on the child, again, either from parent or teacher, in regards to things that they're expecting them to achieve? Are they expecting or wanting them to take exams, for example? Now, exams are important and they have a very important place. It's a really good way of gauging progression and giving somebody something to aim for and an incentive to practice. But for some, it can have the opposite effect. I'm not saying that goals or having something to aim for when it comes to playing an instrument aren't important, because they are. Most of us need some kind of goal, some kind of reason to do what we need to do. I don't love practicing all the time. Don't get me wrong, I do like practicing, especially these days when I don't get as much time to do it. So I really do cherish the time that I get to sit down and practice. But I remember back when I was young and I used to tape record myself practicing and play it back in the hope that my mum thought I was actually practicing, whereas instead I was reading a Beano magazine. So when it comes down to exams, it might be that that isn't an incentive to a child who's having music lessons. That might not be the reason that they want to be learning an instrument. It might be because they want to be able to play Elton John or Taylor Swift or whatever it might be. So being made to learn a set of scales, various other elements that are included in doing a music exam, and pieces that, though there is some choice, is relatively constricted because you've got to choose from a set of pieces that you are kind of given. So I think it's really important to talk to the child that's having the lessons about what it is they want to get out of learning an instrument. What do they want to be able to do with it? I think piano is almost different in some senses, in that you can sit down and play music to sound very, very similar or almost exactly the same as your favourite pop artist or rock singer or whatever it might be, which obviously if you sit down by yourself with a French horn is a little bit trickier to do. Now, though exams might not be the way forward, if we give them no goals whatsoever, then getting that regular, consistent practice is going to be just as hard. You've got to have something that's going to make them want to sit down and practice. And what we've got to remember is, for those of you that don't play an instrument, if it's just your child that does, is it takes a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, and it's quite hard work. You've got to read, particularly with the piano, you've got to read 2 sets of lines, which is like reading 2 different foreign languages, and you've got to be able to find where the notes correlate to on the instrument, or how to produce the note, or the fingering, or whatever it might be. You've got to coordinate the hands with whatever instrument you're using. And then there's lots of other things that you've got to bear in mind, which I won't go into now. Because like for myself, even if I pick a piece that I really want to learn and I want to perform it in a concert and I want to play it because it challenges me, I don't enjoy the first few sessions or the first few weeks of practice. But as an adult with experience, I know that I've got to get myself through that bit to get to the point where I can play it and get more pleasure out of playing that piece. But it's really hard to do, and that's where the support comes in. It's not about enforcing a certain amount of practice. It's about encouraging and finding the reasons that they don't enjoy either having the lessons or playing, and what would make those things more enjoyable for them. So perhaps that instead of an exam, they could think of one of their favourite pieces that they would like to learn and think of a goal that ties in with that piece. For example, getting it to a performance ready state where they could video record it for a family member's birthday who particularly likes Taylor Swift, or they like Star Wars movies, so let's learn a piece that comes from Star Wars. Perhaps it could be just to do a similar thing, to perform it to somebody, or to a member of the family or a family friend, or whatever it might be. And depending on where you are, there are obviously opportunities to perform. There are always local festivals and hopefully opportunities within the school or the environment that you're in. But what we've got to remember is that if they're not enjoying it, they're not going to practice, and without the practice, they're not going to progress. And then they're going to get frustrated because their ability isn't improving. And the more you improve, the more pleasure you get out of playing, because the more you're able to play things that sound the way that you want them to sound, or the quicker you're able to learn to read new music. And we've got to remember at the end of the day that such a very small percentage of children that start music lessons want to be a professional musician or are going to go off to music college and the like. If we were talking about somebody who was having lessons that did want to go down the route of music college and a career, then obviously it's a different conversation in that practice is essential, but that's a video for another day. But ultimately, what we're looking for are ways that we can help them enjoy and encourage them to practice more, at least starting off with those small nuggets of practice. I also appreciate when parents have this kind of conversation with pupils or with students, because at the end of the day, if it's an extracurricular activity, it's something that's going to benefit them, it's something that's going to enhance their lives, possibly forever. Because if you think about other extracurricular activities that your children do, for example, if they play in a football team, now we want them to do their best, and we want and we have the hope that doing those kind of things instills things like hard work and dedication, teamwork, meeting new people, all those kind of things, that they come out of it. But we don't put pressure on them to be the next Ronaldo. Sorry, Messi, it's a no for me. So we have to remember that our expectations for paying the money for these lessons shouldn't be achieving grade 4, achieving grade 7, achieving grade 8, because actually in the long term it'll hinder the progression. Many people, particularly those that don't know an awful lot about music or music lessons, just see classical music or music that's basically not pop music as something that isn't proper music, that you can't be a good pianist or a good violinist from. But at the end of the day, there are technical difficulties within every piece of music if you've got the correct arrangement. So there's all sorts of different technical things that you can work on through playing Taylor Swift, for example. And just because we're not doing the designated scales that are being used in a grade book, we can use exercises that are either similar to or based around technical problems that arise in the piece or the song that they're learning at that time. I mean, I love Mozart and Freddie Mercury. In some ways, there are some similarities between the two. I won't go into those now. But in other ways, they're very, very different, aren't they? Both had a very successful pop, rock career, whichever way you want to look at it. But the journey of the two, first of all, I would say, well, who would you say was better at playing the piano? If you've not seen either of them play the piano, which I'd be surprised if you haven't, but go have a look on YouTube and just have a listen to Freddie Mercury, Elton John playing a song on the piano, and watch them and see who you think, in your opinion, this is a bit like a Ronaldo Messi moment, who you think is the better pianist. Now, you wouldn't guess this from the way that Elton John plays, because the way that he plays, his style, suits the music that he writes, and is obviously the way that he wants to play. But Elton John actually went to music college. I don't know if any of you have seen the biographical film about Elton John, but again, it shows his journey as a pianist, a very talented pianist that got picked up and kind of went down that route and then ended up using that skill for what he does now. Whereas we look at somebody like Freddie Mercury and it's a completely different journey. He went up to, I think it was grade 3 or grade 4, and then basically remained self-taught. Now, I'm not recommending that being self-taught is always the best way. You're never going to get the most out of the time that you put into it or your ability to play the instrument. But listening to them side by side, you probably wouldn't be able to pick out which one of them had or hadn't been to a very prestigious music college. I'd like to argue, despite the fact that Elton John's been to music college, that Freddie was actually the better pianist. Now, what about if they enjoy the music lessons, but they don't practice? Now, I look at this a little bit like me and fitness. Now, there have been periods in life where I've done a lot of fitness and I've been very fit, not so much at the moment. But, for example, if I went to the gym once a week and I really enjoyed that and that made me feel really good and it relieved some stress, made me feel better about myself and just physically made me feel better, I'm not going to become an athlete by doing that. I'm not going to grow muscle. I'm not going to anything in particular by doing that one session a week, but I enjoy it. So does that mean because I only show up once a week to do it, that despite the benefits of that one day a week, I should just not do it at all? I don't think so. So let's think about some of the benefits of having music lessons, even if they're only playing once a week in their lesson. Now, don't get me wrong, I much prefer it if a student practices. It's much more beneficial, obviously. They progress, we get to do new things, we get to build on what they've done the previous week, and obviously it feels great. But if that's all they do, that time that they have in their lesson, we've also got to think about the benefits, like with the gym, that has. First of all, playing any musical instrument is great for coordination. It's brilliant for motor skills. And playing a musical instrument has been proven by technical medical scans, whatever you call them, MRIs and all sorts of things, that actually playing a musical instrument whilst doing it uses more of the brain at one given time than any other activity or thing that the human body does. So even if it is just for that half an hour a week, it's basically like the best brain workout that you could possibly be doing. The other thing for me is that despite the thousands of hours that I've practiced and the difficult level of pieces that I've been able to learn and perform, I would say that particularly during my teenage years, where I went through a traumatic time with my mum passing at a young age, I didn't use those skills to sit down and play Liszt or Mozart or Beethoven. I went and sat at the piano and played anything that I wanted to play, be it Beatles or Queen or whatever it was. And it was so therapeutic. And I always look back, and I have done for years, many obviously, back on that time and think, how would I have got through that without the piano? And I'm sure a lot of people feel like that about fitness and the gym. But I didn't need those thousands of hours of skills. But that saved my mental health during that time period. And it was so important to me that I had that skill to be able to just sit down and literally just play some chords and sing till my heart was feeling better. So I think even just as a skill to whatever level you reach it with, it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to sit and do whatever instrument you play, to just sit and play and switch off. And of course the other thing that's great about playing an instrument is that you can take part in ensembles, and you can take part in rock bands, in groups, in quartets, and you can play the piano for other people who are soloists and things like that. I love doing that. I love accompanying. And doing that allows you to meet people that you wouldn't ordinarily meet, but they also have a similar interest. I've had many students in the past who have just loved coming to their lessons and really enjoyed their lessons and been really content with the level that they've got up to, but wanting to just maintain that level by coming to lessons because they just loved playing in the brass band or in the orchestra or in the rock band or whatever it was. What's wrong with that? Because at the end of the day, such a wonderful gift to be given by parents facilitating it through paying for the lessons, or the inspiration that many teachers all over the world give to students. And I think that, for example, as a horn player, there's nothing that makes me smile more when I'm playing the horn than sitting in a full line of a brass section and hearing us all play really, really loud in incredible harmonies and blasting out themes from movies or whatever it might be. It's just such an incredible feeling being part of something that collectively with all the other players around you is just so big. It's just incredible. I think it's also important to look at the quality of their instrument as well. There are so many instruments that you can buy fairly decent versions of for not too much money these days. So if your child has got an instrument where keys don't work, or valves stick, or a piano that's completely out of tune, it's worth talking to their teacher, because it's amazing how much of a negative effect that can have on the pleasure that you get out of playing an instrument if it doesn't properly work. Think about anything else that we might do where we require a tool to do it. It might be that it just needs some time spent on it by a specialist just to sort a few things out, or it might need replacing. Now, I'm not an advocate for digital pianos, but they are better than having a bad piano, one that's perhaps wildly out of tune, or has broken keys, or things that don't work on it, or funny noises that come from it. I mean, nobody wants to sit and listen to an instrument like that in a performance, so why would your child get pleasure out of sitting down to playing that? Now, I appreciate that these things can be expensive, but there are ways of finding second-hand decent full-length keyboards that have got an action that feels as close to playing a real piano as possible. The other thing is, are they on the right instrument? I know people who have initially asked to play whatever instrument it might be, but perhaps it wasn't available at the time, and they've been given or been suggested to play another instrument. Perhaps that's not the instrument for them. I find that being a brass teacher, that sometimes somebody might want to learn the trumpet, and I can see just by looking at them, because playing a brass instrument requires quite a lot of facial muscles, and different kind of lip shapes can affect how easy it is for you to play different brass instruments, because the sizes of the mouthpieces are very, very different. And I can sometimes see that somebody might suit playing a particular brass instrument over another, but they might be really keen to play the one that they might not be better suited to, and because they find that then difficult and progression is very slow, that can be very off-putting as well. So it's worth looking into that as well and thinking, maybe this is the time where we try this other one and just see how much easier you find that to play. Quite often I'll give somebody, whichever way around you want to look at it, say for example they want to play the trumpet but they'd be better suited to playing the trombone, and they're struggling on the trumpet for ages. I've seen it so many times where later through the journey, and they finally give up and want to try something else, and they try the trombone and they think, oh, I can play so many notes on this, it's so easy to blow. And then they get excited about learning again. So it's definitely worth looking at the condition and quality of the instrument that they're playing on. It doesn't need to be worth a fortune, it just needs to work, and it needs to be in tune and enable them to do what they're trying to do and what they're being asked to learn. Now, as I said at the beginning, I appreciate that finance can be a massive thing to do with this. Now, one of the first things you think about is the money that you're wasting when you can see your child not putting any effort into those music lessons through practicing at home. Now, I hope I've given you a few reasons as to why I think that it's a good idea to keep those lessons going despite that, but I also appreciate that sometimes the kind of financial factor is just something that you can't get away from. Now, my old teacher, one of my old teachers, Christine Brown, she didn't have any children, so when she passed, she left all her estate to something that she'd set up, which is called the Christine Brown Trust. And it's basically there for people to apply for help with money and finances towards having music lessons. I'm going to put the link in the description. So if this is you and you feel like a lot of what I've said has made sense, and you think, yeah, obviously it's still worth carrying on these lessons, but actually we really can't afford it, then I really do suggest that you go and take a look at this link and apply for some help with that, because as I've said, it's just been such an important part of my life, even if it hadn't become my living. So, to summarise, do I think you should stop your children's music lessons, even if they don't practice, or even if they're not progressing, and all those other things? Of course I don't. I think you've figured that one out from the way that I've been talking so far. The final and other thing to look at is, do they get on well with the teacher? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad teacher, though there are plenty of those out there, or that they're not a very nice person, but it's like when we meet people and we make friends with people, for example, we don't always get on with everybody. We don't always gravitate towards every single person, because we're all different and we might have different things in common or a different way of talking, and we might just click with one person more than another, and that's just normal, and that's why we gravitate towards certain people or different circles of people. And it can be the same with a teacher. If you don't get on with them, or they just don't inspire you, that doesn't mean they don't inspire other people, but everybody finds different things about people inspiring. Some people like their teachers to do quite a lot of demonstrating, and they find that quite inspiring. Other teachers don't do that, and both ways are absolutely fine because different methods work for different people, which is why it's such a wonderful challenge that I love doing as a teacher, in that one way can't teach all students how to do a particular thing or technique or piece or whatever it might be. I love the challenge of figuring out different ways of teaching the same thing. So perhaps it's worth a conversation with your child just to say, look, do you enjoy the lessons with that teacher? Would you like to potentially look at changing if they've been with that teacher for quite a while? I'm not suggesting, because this also isn't helpful, that you just basically teach a hop until you find one that you get on with. But if they feel like there are reasons why they don't get on with that particular teacher so much, or don't feel particularly inspired by them, or can't relate to them, or whatever it might be, then it's something to look into. So hopefully I've helped you understand a little bit why I think it's important to keep music lessons going even when you feel like nothing much is coming out of them, because I can assure you that it absolutely is. Now obviously, if your child is saying that they don't enjoy the lessons and it's because they don't want to do them, or they don't enjoy the instrument and there's no other instruments that they'd like to try, or they don't particularly enjoy the time that they spend with the teacher but they're not interested in finding another one, then obviously there's a point where the lessons should stop, because there might be something else that's not music that they would enjoy doing, and that's a great time of life to try different things and find what that is. But it's really important before those lessons get stopped that you figure out if there's a reason as to why they're not practicing or progressing or enjoying what they're doing, because there are so many things you can look at, so many things you can change, as I've pointed out in the video, and I think it's really worth exploring, because I can tell you there are so many adults that have come to me later in life and said, I wished my parents had kept me going with those piano lessons. I know I didn't practice, but I did enjoy them, and I really wish that I could still play that instrument now. So it's definitely worth thinking about. Okay, well, thank you for watching this video, and I hope you took something from it. Do give it a like, leave me a comment, let me know what you think about any of the things that I've said, or any of the experiences that you've had or are having with your children, or any questions that you might have about their music lessons. And I'd love to help, and I love reading comments and replying to them. Please also do subscribe so you can get any future videos, and when you have, why not look back and have a look at all the old ones. See you later.